I never thought I'd see the day when the woman who destroyed my son's life would be standing in handcuffs, and the detective who put them on her was my new daughter-in-law. Before I tell you this story, I'd be grateful if you'd hit that subscribe button and give this a like. It helps me share these stories with others who might need to hear them. This is a long journey, one that took years to unfold, so settle in and let me take you back to where it all began. The beginning. My name is Eleanor Rose Mitchell. I'm 68 years old, and for most of my life, I believed I was blessed. I had a loving husband, Tom, a modest 3-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood in Tigard, just outside Portland, Oregon. White picket fence, rose bushes I planted the year we moved in, a porch swing where we'd sit every evening watching the sun go down behind the mountains. And we had one precious miracle, our son, Daniel Thomas Mitchell. We tried for years to have more children. 5 long years of hoping, praying, doctor's visits that led nowhere, temperature charts, specialists in downtown Portland, treatments we could barely afford, month after month of disappointment. But Daniel was the only one God allowed us to have, so I loved him twice as fiercely. Maybe that was my first mistake, loving him so much I couldn't see the danger coming. He was everything to us, brown eyes like his father's, a gentle laugh, a boy who brought home stray cats and cried when we had to give them away. But life has a way of breaking even the strongest people. Tom died when Daniel was 17, pancreatic cancer. Stage 4, by the time they found it. It happened fast, too fast. 6 months from diagnosis to funeral. I remember the last morning. Tom held my hand in that hospital bed at Providence, Portland, machines beeping softly around us. "Take care of our boy," he whispered. Those were his last words. At the funeral, Daniel stood beside me in his father's too big suit, his shoulders shaking as he tried not to sob in front of the neighbors, the church friends, his high school teachers. He was trying to be the man of the house. 17 years old. From that day forward, it was just the two of us. I raised him with everything I had, worked double shifts at Providence Street, Vincent Medical Center. I was a surgical nurse for 30 years, made sure he got through Portland State University, helped him buy his first car, a used Honda Civic with a dent in the passenger door, watched him grow into the kindest man I've ever known, gentle like his father, but with a quiet strength all his own. He became a civil engineer. Good job with the city, steady, reliable. When he was 32, he brought home a woman named Lila Brennan. I tried to see the good in her. She was striking, tall, maybe 5'9", with blonde hair she wore in perfect waves, always dressed like she'd stepped out of a Nordstrom catalog, designer jeans, expensive handbags, nails done every 2 weeks. Her laugh was loud and confident, the kind that made everyone in a restaurant turn and look. She worked in marketing, she said, for a tech startup downtown, talked about campaigns and social media metrics and brand awareness. It all sounded impressive. The first time she came to Sunday dinner, she brought wine, expensive wine, and complimented everything. My roast chicken, my wallpaper, my garden. She hugged me and called me Mom by the 3rd visit. Too sweetly, I thought sometimes. Like someone performing for an audience that wasn't there yet. But Daniel loved her. His eyes lit up when she walked into a room. He laughed more, smiled more. For the first time since Tom died, my son seemed truly happy. So when Daniel told me he was going to propose, I smiled and hugged him and said all the right things. I blessed their marriage, and that was the last peaceful year we had. The wedding and the slow unraveling. They got married on a Saturday in June at Hoyt Arboretum. Beautiful ceremony, maybe 100 guests, white chairs arranged under the tall trees, sunlight filtering through the leaves. Lila wore a dress that must have cost thousands, all lace and silk and tiny pearls. She looked like a princess. Daniel looked like the happiest man alive. I remember sitting in the front row, watching my son say his vows, and feeling Tom's absence like a physical weight. He should have been there. He should have walked Daniel down the aisle, given the father's toast, danced with me during the reception, but he wasn't. So I smiled through my tears and clapped when they kissed. At the reception, Lila's best friend caught the bouquet, a tall woman with short dark hair named Amber Hayes. She and Lila screamed and hugged like teenagers. "We've been best friends since high school," Lila announced to everyone. They posed for pictures, laughing, arms around each other. I thought it was sweet. Childhood friends still close after all these years. I had no idea. The first few months seemed normal. Daniel and Lila moved into a small house in Beaverton, a 2-bedroom with a tiny yard and a 1-car garage. Daniel was so proud. He'd saved for years for that down payment. They had us over for dinner once a month. Lila would cook or order takeout and pretend she'd cooked, and we'd sit around their little dining table talking about work, about the neighborhood, about nothing important. But slowly, things began to change. Daniel's smile started to fade. Our Sunday dinners, something we'd done every week since Tom died, grew shorter. He'd check his phone constantly, leave early with vague excuses. "Lila's not feeling well. We have plans later. I've got work to catch up on." His visits became rare. Some Sundays he wouldn't come at all. When I'd call during the week, he'd answer, but his voice sounded different. Hollow, tired, like he was carrying a weight I couldn't see. I asked him once, "Danny, is everything okay? You seem distant." "I'm fine, Mom," he said quickly. Too quickly. "Just busy with work. You know how it is." But I didn't know, because my son had never lied to me before. Then came the first request. It was a Thursday evening, late October, rain pouring down outside. My phone rang. "Mom, I hate to ask, but could you help us out? Things are a little tight this month." I sat up straighter on my couch. "What do you mean tight?" "Just bills. Car payments due and Lila's commission check got delayed." I didn't ask questions. Mothers don't question their baby's pain. We just fix it. "How much do you need? 500? Just until her check comes through." I sent him 600 the next day. But that wasn't the end. The requests kept coming. "November, Mom, the furnace broke. Can you help with the repair?" $800. "December, the car needs new brakes. It's not safe to drive." $400. "January, Lila's hours got cut at work. Can you cover the electric bill?" $300. Each time, Daniel's voice sounded a little more strained, a little more ashamed. I wanted to ask more questions, but every time I tried, he'd say, "We're fine, Mom. Really, it's just temporary. Lila's company is restructuring. Things will get better." I believed him, or maybe I just wanted to. By March, I'd given them nearly $8,000. Money I'd been saving for retirement. Money Tom and I had put away for emergencies. And then Daniel told me something that made my stomach drop. "Mom, we sold the house." I was at my kitchen sink washing dishes. I nearly dropped the plate in my hand. "You what?" "We sold it. Last week. We're moving into an apartment in Gresham." "Danny, why? You loved that house. You worked so hard. We needed the equity," he said, his voice flat, dead. "We're drowning, Mom. This was the only way." "Drowning in what?" "Danny, what's going on?" There was a long silence. "I don't know anymore," he whispered. Then he hung up. I drove to their house the next day, the house they'd already sold, and found Daniel outside loading boxes into a U-Haul truck. He looked terrible, like he'd lost 20 pounds. Dark circles under his eyes, unshaven, clothes hanging off him. "Danny." He didn't look at me, just kept loading boxes. "Where's Lila?" "Out with Amber," he muttered. I helped him load the truck in silence. And the whole time, I felt a cold dread settling in my chest. Something was very, very wrong. I didn't see much of Daniel after the move. He stopped coming to Sunday dinners altogether, stopped answering my calls. When I'd text him, I'd get one-word responses, "busy," later, "fine." But he wasn't fine. The new apartment was in a rough part of Gresham, a shabby complex with peeling paint and cars on blocks in the parking lot. I drove by once, sat in my car staring at the building, wondering how my son had ended up here. Then, one night in early November, exactly a year after that first phone call asking for money, someone knocked on my door. It was raining again, that cold Oregon rain that seeps into your bones. I opened the door. Daniel stood there soaking wet, shivering, no jacket. He looked like a ghost wearing my son's face. "Danny." "Can I come in, Mom?" I pulled him inside, grabbed towels, made tea he didn't drink, wrapped a blanket around his shoulders while he sat at my kitchen table, staring at nothing. "Danny, talk to me, please." He didn't speak for a long time. Then, finally, he looked up at me with eyes so full of pain I almost couldn't breathe. "She's been lying to me, Mom," he whispered, "the whole time, from the beginning." "Who?" "Lila." He nodded. "Lying about what?" And then he told me everything. Lila, my beautiful, bright, charming daughter-in-law, had been living a double life. She had a lover, a woman named Amber Hayes, the same woman who'd caught the bouquet at their wedding, the same woman Lila introduced as her childhood best friend, the woman who was always around, always texting, always needing Lila for something. They'd been together the whole time, before the marriage, during the engagement, during the wedding, during every Sunday dinner at my house. They never stopped. Daniel found out by accident. He'd come home early from work one afternoon. His project got canceled and found them together in the apartment. In his bed. "She didn't even look sorry, Mom," Daniel said, his voice breaking. "She just looked annoyed that I was home." My hands shook. "And the money?" Daniel laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. "All of it. Every penny I made. Every dollar you gave us. It all went to her and Amber." The details came out slowly, painfully. Lila had been funneling money to a secret account for years. She and Amber had been living a second life together, a life Daniel was funding without even knowing it. While Daniel worked 60-hour weeks at the city engineering department, while he skipped lunches to save money, while he drove a car with 200,000 miles because he couldn't afford a new one, Lila and Amber took trips to Cabo San Lucas, to Seattle, to San Francisco. They rented a second apartment in the Pearl District, Portland's most expensive neighborhood. Designer clothes, spa days, expensive dinners at restaurants Daniel couldn't afford. She sold his furniture while he was at work, told him they were downsizing, pawned the gold pocket watch that had belonged to Tom, the one thing Daniel had left of his father, even cashed out Daniel's small retirement fund without his signature, forged it somehow. When Daniel confronted her after finding them together, she didn't apologize, didn't cry, didn't beg for forgiveness. She told him it was his fault. "You're boring, Daniel. You work all the time. You never want to go anywhere or do anything. Amber makes me feel alive. She understands me. You're just emotionally unavailable." Then she packed 2 suitcases, loaded them into Amber's car, and drove away. She took half of what little was left in their joint account, left him with the lease on an apartment he couldn't afford, and never looked back. Daniel sat at my kitchen table that night and cried. Not the quiet tears of a funeral, but deep, racking sobs that shook his whole body. The kind of crying that comes from a soul that's been shattered. I held my son, my 34-year-old son, the way I'd held him when he was 5 and fell off his bike. But this wasn't a scraped knee. This was a wound I couldn't bandage. "I'm so stupid, Mom," he kept saying. "How did I not see it? How did I not know?" "You're not stupid, baby. You trusted her. That's not stupid. That's love." "She destroyed me," he whispered. And he was right. She had. What followed were the darkest years of my life. Worse than losing Tom. Worse than anything I'd ever experienced. Because at least with Tom, I got to say goodbye. I got to hold his hand, tell him I loved him, watch him go peacefully. But with Daniel, I watched my son disappear while he was still breathing. He quit his job at the city, stopped answering calls from his friends, stopped going to church. We'd gone to Cedar Hills Community Church every Sunday since he was baptized there as a baby. Stopped doing anything except exist. He moved into a studio apartment in Milwaukee, even smaller, even cheaper. Got a night job stocking shelves at a Safeway on 81 Avenue. Worked alone, came home alone, slept during the day. I'd stop by his apartment, and he wouldn't answer the door. I'd leave groceries on his doorstep, soup, bread, fresh fruit, and find them still sitting there days later. Once, I used my spare key and let myself in. The apartment was dark, Curtains closed, even though it was noon. Empty takeout containers on the counter. Daniel was asleep on a bare mattress on the floor. No sheets, no blanket. I sat beside him and cried. This wasn't my son. This was a shell. A ghost. I didn't lose him to death. I lost him to shame. And watching that broke me in ways I didn't know were possible. I tried everything. I begged him to see a therapist. He refused. I tried to get him to move back home with me. He said no, said he needed to be alone. I called his old friends, college buddies, co-workers from the city. They'd tried too. He wouldn't return their calls either. For 2 years, I watched my son waste away. And I hated Lila. God forgive me, but I hated her with every fiber of my being. Not just for what she did to Daniel, but for the cruelty of it, the coldness, the way she walked away without a single backward glance. Some nights, I'd lie awake, imagining confronting her, telling her exactly what she'd done, making her feel even a fraction of the pain she'd caused. But I never did, because I didn't know where she was. And honestly, I was afraid of what I might do if I found her. Then, slowly, so slowly I almost didn't notice, something began to shift. It started in the 3rd year. Daniel began answering my calls again. Not every time, but sometimes. He came to Sunday dinner once, sat quietly, barely ate, but he came. I didn't push, didn't ask questions, just put food on his plate and told him about my week. He came back the next week, and the week after that. Small steps. By the 4th year, he'd found a new job, back in engineering, working for Multnomah County. Moved into a better apartment in Southeast Portland. Started eating regularly again, gaining weight, looking more like himself. But his eyes were still sad, still guarded, like he was waiting for the next betrayal. I thought that sadness would be there forever. I was wrong. It was a Sunday in late spring. Daniel came to dinner and asked if he could bring someone. My heart stopped. Someone? Her name's Grace, he said quietly. We've been seeing each other for a few months now. I'd like you to meet her, if that's okay. I tried to keep my voice steady. Of course, sweetheart. Of course. The following Sunday, Daniel arrived with a woman I'd never seen before. Grace Chen was nothing like Lila. She was shorter, maybe 5'4", with straight dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. No makeup except a little mascara. Wearing jeans, a navy blue button-down shirt, and worn sneakers. But her eyes were warm and kind and steady. The kind of eyes that looked at you and actually saw you. Miss S. Mitchell, she said, extending her hand. It's so nice to meet you. Daniel talks about you all the time. Her handshake was firm, confident, but not aggressive. Please, call me Eleanor, I said. Come in, come in. Over dinner, I learned that Grace was a detective with the Multnomah County Sheriff's Office. She'd been with the department for 8 years. Worked mostly financial crimes, fraud, embezzlement, identity theft. So you catch bad guys, I said. She smiled. Something like that. Mostly I catch people who steal from other people. It's not as glamorous as TV makes it look. How did you two meet? Daniel glanced at Grace, and something softened in his face. Something I hadn't seen in years. Coffee shop, Grace said. I was working on case files. Daniel sat down at the next table. We both reached for the sugar at the same time, bumped hands, spilled coffee everywhere. She laughed. A genuine, easy laugh. He helped me clean up the mess. We started talking. And here we are. Daniel was smiling. Really smiling. Grace came to dinner every Sunday after that. She was easy to be around. Didn't talk too much or too little. Asked thoughtful questions. Helped me wash dishes. She treated Daniel with a gentleness I'd never seen from Lila. Never pushed him. Never demanded more than he could give. One Sunday, I watched them together in my living room. Daniel was showing her old photo albums, pictures from his childhood, from high school, from before everything fell apart. Grace listened patiently, smiled at the right moments, asked about Tom. And I saw something in Daniel's eyes that I thought was gone forever. Hope. But Daniel was still scared. I could see it. He held back, kept part of himself locked away, like he was waiting for Grace to turn into someone else. One evening, after Grace had left, I made Daniel stay for tea. "She's good for you," I said gently. Daniel stared into his cup. "I know, but you're afraid." He didn't answer for a long time. "What if I'm wrong again, Mom? What if I can't see the truth? What if, Danny?" I reached across and took his hand. "Grace is not Lila. I can see that, and I think you can too." His eyes filled with tears. "I don't know if I can go through that again. If it happens again, I don't think I'll survive it." "Then don't rush," I said softly. "Take your time. Be cautious if you need to be. But don't let fear rob you of something real." Over the next year, I watched Daniel slowly, carefully let Grace in. She never complained about his hesitation, never pushed him to move faster, just loved him quietly, patiently, the way Tom once loved me. They moved in together, into a small house in the Woodstock neighborhood. Nothing fancy. 2 bedrooms, a tiny yard, an old maple tree out front. Daniel was still cautious, still waited for the other shoe to drop, but it never did. They married 2 years after that first Sunday dinner. It was a small ceremony at my house, just 10 people, Grace's parents and younger sister, a couple of Daniel's friends from work, our pastor from Cedar Hills. No fancy venue, no expensive dress. Grace wore a simple cream-colored dress from Macy's. Daniel wore the same suit he'd worn to Tom's funeral. It fit him again now that he'd gained back the weight. They said their vows in my backyard under the old oak tree Tom had planted the year we bought the house. And when Daniel kissed his bride, I saw Tom in that moment, felt his presence like a hand on my shoulder. Our boy was going to be okay. A year later, Grace came to Sunday dinner with news. "Eleanor." She looked at Daniel, then back at me, her eyes shining. "We're having a baby." I stood up so fast I nearly knocked over my chair. Daniel was grinning, truly grinning, for the first time in over a decade. I hugged them both and cried happy tears. For the first time in years, hope bloomed in my house again. I thought the nightmare was finally over. I thought we were safe. I was wrong. It was late May. Grace was 7 months pregnant, round and glowing and beautiful. She'd been on light duty at work, desk assignments, no field work. One evening, she came home later than usual. I was at their house helping Daniel set up the nursery, painting the walls a soft yellow, assembling the crib. When Grace walked in, I knew immediately something was wrong. Her face was pale. Her hands were shaking. Daniel noticed too. "Grace, what's wrong? Is it the baby?" No, the baby's fine." She set her bag down slowly, took off her jacket with mechanical movements. "I caught a case today," she said quietly. Daniel waited. Grace looked at me, then at him. "Financial exploitation, identity fraud, forgery. The DA's office handed it over this morning. Victim is a woman in Lake Oswego, 62 years old, retired teacher. The suspect drained her accounts, took out loans in her name, stole her retirement savings, nearly $400,000 over 3 years." She paused. "The suspect's name is Lila Brennan." The room went silent. The paintbrush slipped from my hand and clattered to the floor. Daniel's face went white. "What?" he whispered. "Lila Brennan," Grace repeated, her voice shaking now. I didn't make the connection at first. Different address, different employer listed, but then I saw her photo in the case file, and something felt familiar. So I looked her up, ran her full history. Grace pulled out her phone, hands trembling, pulled up a photo. Even from across the room, I recognized her. Lila. Older now, different hair, shorter, darker, but the same eyes. The same cold, calculating eyes. "That's her," Daniel said, his voice barely audible. "That's my ex-wife." The story came out slowly. After leaving Daniel, Lila and Amber had moved to Lake Oswego, a wealthy suburb south of Portland. They'd rented a condo, lived well, spent money like they had it. Then Lila met Patricia Holbrook at a yoga studio. Patricia was a widow. Her husband had died 2 years earlier, leaving her comfortable but lonely. Lila befriended her, the same way she'd charmed me, charmed Daniel, charmed everyone. She offered to help Patricia organize her finances, said she had experience in financial planning, gained Patricia's trust slowly, carefully. Then she started stealing, forged checks, opened credit cards in Patricia's name, took out a home equity loan without Patricia's knowledge, all while pretending to be Patricia's loving, helpful friend. By the time Patricia discovered what was happening, her accounts were empty, her credit was destroyed, her retirement was gone. She'd filed a police report 3 months ago, and the detective assigned to the case was Grace. "I arrested her this afternoon," Grace said quietly. "At her condo. She was home alone. Amber wasn't there. When I told her why I was there, she tried to run, made it to the parking lot before I caught her." Daniel sat down heavily on the floor, his back against the nursery wall. "She did it again," he whispered. "She found someone else to destroy." Grace knelt beside him, awkward with her pregnant belly. "I'm so sorry, Daniel. I had no idea. If I'd known, I would have recused myself from the case." "No." Daniel looked up at her. "No, Grace, you did your job. You stopped her from hurting anyone else." He took her hand. "You caught her." That night, after Daniel fell asleep, Grace and I sat together in their kitchen. "Eleanor," she said softly, "I need to tell you something. I wasn't entirely honest earlier." I looked at her. I did recognize her, not from photos. Daniel destroyed all those. But from the background check I ran when Daniel and I first started dating seriously. My eyebrows rose. Grace gave me a small, sheepish smile. "I'm a detective. I run backgrounds on everyone I date. Occupational hazard." I saw her name in his history, saw the divorce record. I didn't pry into details. That was his story to tell. But when I saw her name today, in that case file, I knew exactly who she was. She paused. Part of me wanted to call my sergeant and hand the case off, but then I read Patricia's statement, read what Lila did to her, and I thought, this woman has hurt enough people. It's time for her to face consequences. She looked at me with those steady, kind eyes. "I want to do right by Patricia, but I also want to do right by Daniel and by you. She hurt your family too." I reached across the table and took her hand. "Thank you," I whispered, "for being exactly who you are." Over the next few weeks, Grace worked the case. Even on light duty, she coordinated with other detectives, built the evidence, prepared everything for the district attorney. The case against Lila was airtight. Forged signatures on checks and loan documents. Security footage of Lila at banks making withdrawals from Patricia's accounts. Text messages between Lila and Amber discussing how much money they'd made and what they'd spent it on. Patricia was brave enough to testify, told her story in heartbreaking detail. But as Grace dug deeper, she found something else. Lila had done this before, not just to Daniel, not just to Patricia. There were at least 3 other victims over the past 12 years. An elderly man in Salem, a recently divorced woman in Eugene, a disabled veteran in Bend. Each time, Lila would befriend someone vulnerable, gain their trust, steal everything, then disappear before they realized what happened. Some had filed police reports, but Lila always moved to a different jurisdiction, changed her appearance slightly, used different names sometimes. The cases were never connected until Grace. Grace reached out to detectives in those other jurisdictions, coordinated evidence, built a multi-county case. By the time the district attorney was done, Lila was facing 17 felony counts across 4 counties. The trial was set for late August, but Lila's public defender knew she had no chance. The evidence was overwhelming, so they negotiated a plea deal. Lila would plead guilty to all charges. In exchange, she'd receive concurrent sentences instead of consecutive ones. 6 years in Coffee Creek Correctional Facility, Oregon's women's prison. Daniel didn't want to go to the sentencing hearing, but I did. The hearing was held in Multnomah County Circuit Court on a Tuesday morning in September. Grace was there in her detective's uniform. Patricia Holbrook was there with her daughter. Representatives from the other victims were there too. And I was there, sitting in the back row, wearing my best dress, hands folded in my lap. Daniel had stayed home. Grace was due any day now, and he didn't want to leave her. But I needed to be there. For him, for me, for everyone Lila had destroyed. They brought Lila in wearing an orange jumpsuit and handcuffs. She looked different. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. No makeup, dark circles under her eyes. She'd lost weight. The expensive clothes and spa days were gone now. She looked small, ordinary, not the polished, confident woman who'd walked into my house years ago. Just a criminal in handcuffs. The judge read the charges. Lila's attorney entered the guilty plea. Then the judge asked if any victims wanted to make statements. Patricia stood up first. Her voice shook as she spoke. "I trusted you," she said, looking directly at Lila. "You were my friend. Or I thought you were. After my husband died, I was so lonely. And you made me feel like I mattered. Like I had a friend who cared." Her voice broke. "You took everything from me. Not just my money. You took my sense of safety, my ability to trust. You took years of memories, the trips I was supposed to take, the gifts I was supposed to give my grandchildren. You took my future." Patricia wiped her eyes. "I hope you think about that every single day you're in prison." Two other victims spoke, each with similar stories, each with the same pain. Then the judge looked around the courtroom. "Anyone else?" I stood up. Grace turned in her seat, eyes widening. She hadn't known I was there. The bailiff gestured for me to come forward. My legs shook as I walked to the front of the courtroom. Lila looked up at me, and her face went white. She knew exactly who I was. I stood at the podium, looked at the judge, then at Lila. "My name is Eleanor Mitchell," I said. "I'm Daniel Mitchell's mother." Daniel was married to the defendant 7 years ago. The prosecutor stood up. "Your Honor, Miss S. Mitchell's son was not listed as a victim in this case." "I know," I said, "but I am." The judge leaned forward. "Go ahead, Miss S. Mitchell." I took a deep breath. "Lila came into our lives like a storm," I said. "Beautiful, charming, confident. My son fell in love with her, and I wanted to believe she loved him too." I looked directly at Lila. "You married him knowing you were living a lie. You stood in front of God, his family, our friends, and you made promises you never intended to keep. While my son worked 70-hour weeks, while he skipped meals to save money, while he sold his father's watch, the only thing he had left of his father, you and your girlfriend were living a second life. On his money, on my money, on his heartbreak." My voice shook, but I kept going. "You didn't just steal money, Lila. You stole years of my son's life. You stole his ability to trust. You stole his joy. For 4 years after you left, I watched my son become a ghost. He stopped eating, stopped sleeping, stopped living. I thought I was going to lose him, not to death, but to the pain you caused." Tears ran down my face. "I'm standing here today because my son survived you. He found someone who truly loves him. He's rebuilding his life. But that's not because of any justice system. That's not because you faced consequences. That's because he's stronger than you ever were." I paused. "I hope these 6 years teach you something. I hope you think about every person you've hurt, every life you've destroyed. And I hope, when you get out, you become someone different. Because the person you are right now isn't worth the air she breathes." The courtroom was silent. Lila stared down at the table, tears streaming down her face. I turned and walked back to my seat. Grace was crying. Patricia was crying. Even the bailiff looked moved. The judge sentenced Lila to 6 years, as agreed in the plea deal. But he added something else. "Miss Brennan," he said, his voice cold, "I've been on this bench for 20 years. I've seen a lot of criminals. But what you did, the calculated cruelty of it, is some of the worst I've encountered. You didn't just steal money. You stole trust, safety, hope. 6 years isn't enough, but it's what the law allows. I hope you spend every single day of those 6 years thinking about the lives you've destroyed, and I hope, when you get out, you never hurt anyone again." He banged his gavel. "This court is adjourned." As they led Lila away, she looked back at me one more time. Our eyes met, and in that moment, I saw it. Regret. Real, genuine regret. Maybe she'd finally understood what she'd done. Or maybe she was just sorry she got caught. I'll never know. And honestly, I don't care. That afternoon, I got a call from Daniel. "Mom, Grace went into labor. We're at the hospital." I drove to Providence Street, Vincent, the same hospital where I'd worked for 30 years, the same hospital where Tom had died. And this time, I was there for a beginning, not an ending. Grace was in labor for 14 hours. Daniel never left her side. I sat in the waiting room, praying, knitting a baby blanket, watching the sun set through the windows. At 11:47 p.m., a nurse came out smiling. "It's a boy. Everyone's healthy." They named him Thomas Daniel Mitchell. Tommy, after his grandfather. I held him in that hospital room, his tiny fingers wrapped around mine, and I felt Tom's presence so strongly, I could almost see him standing there beside me. "Look at him, Tom," I whispered. "Look at our grandson." Daniel stood beside me, smiling the same smile he'd had as a boy, before the world tried to break him. Grace lay in the hospital bed, exhausted and glowing. Our family was whole again. Life returned to something close to normal. Sunday dinners resumed, now with a high chair at the table. Tommy was the center of everyone's world. Daniel got promoted at work, senior engineer for Multnomah County. Grace went back to the department after her maternity leave. They bought a bigger house in Selwood, 3 bedrooms, a real backyard. I helped them move in, just like I'd helped Daniel move all those years ago. But this time was different. This time, there was laughter, hope, love. One Sunday in March, Grace came to my house alone. "Eleanor, the first need to ask you something." We sat in my living room, tea between us. "You remember I told you Lila was at Coffee Creek, right?" I nodded. "Well, she's been trying to contact Daniel." My blood ran cold. "What?" "Letters. She's written him 4 times. The prison screens outgoing mail, but they can't stop her from writing. Daniel hasn't opened any of them. He asked me to just throw them away." She paused. "But I think maybe you should know what they say." She pulled out a folded piece of paper. I kept one. I shouldn't have. But I did. The letter was written in neat handwriting on prison stationery. "Dear Daniel, I know I don't have the right to write to you. I know I don't deserve a response. But I need you to know something. I'm sorry. I was a coward. I was selfish. I was cruel. I destroyed the best thing that ever happened to me because I was too broken to see what I had. You deserved so much better than me. Your mother deserved better than me. I can't undo what I did. I can't give you back those years, but I'm trying to become someone different, someone better. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect anything. I just needed you to know. I'm sorry. Lila." I set the letter down. "Do you think she means it?" Grace asked softly. I thought for a long time. "Maybe," I said finally. "Maybe she does. But it doesn't matter." Grace looked at me. "Daniel doesn't need her apology to heal. He's already healed. He has you. He has Tommy. He has a life worth living. Lila's redemption, if that's what this is for her, not for him." Grace nodded slowly. "Should I tell him about this letter?" "No," I said. "Let him move forward. If he wants to know someday, he'll ask. But right now, let him be happy." 2 years later, Coffee Creek Correctional Facility sits about 45 minutes south of Portland, near the town of Wilsonville. I'd never been there, never planned to go, but 2 years after Lila's sentencing, I got a call from a victim advocate at the district attorney's office. "Miss S. Mitchell, this is Carla Hopkins from the DA's Victim Services. I'm calling because Lila Brennan has requested a restorative justice meeting. She's asked specifically if you'd be willing to participate." I was silent. "You're under no obligation," Carla continued quickly. and Daniel is not being contacted. She specifically asked that he not be included, but she wanted to know if you'd be willing to meet with her, with a facilitator present, in a controlled environment. Why? I asked. She says she wants to apologize, face to face, that she needs you to know she understands what she did. I thought about it for a long time. I'll do it, I said finally. 3 weeks later, I drove to Coffee Creek. Carla met me in the parking lot, walked me through security, explained the process. We sat in a small room with gray walls and a table. A guard stood by the door. Then they brought Lila in. She looked different, not just older, changed. Her hair was longer now, pulled back in a simple braid. No makeup, prison uniform, but her eyes were different too, softer, sadder. She sat down across from me. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. "Thank you for coming," Lila said finally. Her voice was quiet. I didn't respond. "I know you didn't have to. I know you probably hate me. You have every right to." She took a shaky breath. "I've spent 2 years in here thinking about what I did, not just to Daniel, not just to Patricia and the others, but to you." She looked up at me. "You welcomed me into your family. You treated me like a daughter, and I betrayed that. I stole from you. I lied to you. Worst of all, I broke your son." Tears ran down her face. "I don't have an excuse. I was selfish. I was a coward. I thought I could have everything. A respectable life with Daniel and a secret life with Amber. I thought I was so smart. I thought I deserved both. But all I did was destroy people." She wiped her eyes. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve that. I needed you to know that I see it now. I see what I did, and I'm sorry." I sat there for a long time. Then I spoke. "Lila, do you know what the hardest part was?" She shook her head. "It wasn't the money. It wasn't even the lies. It was watching my son give up on himself. After Tom died, Daniel was all I had, and I watched him fall in love with you. I watched him become happy again. Then, I watched you take that away." My voice broke. For 4 years, I didn't know if my son would survive. I thought I might lose him, not to death, but to the pain you caused. Every night, I prayed he'd find a reason to keep living, and he did. But not because of anything you did, because he's strong. Stronger than you ever gave him credit for. I leaned forward. "So your apology, it doesn't change anything for me. It doesn't undo those 4 years. But I hope it changes something for you. I hope it means you'll never do this to anyone else." Lila nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I won't," she whispered. "I swear I won't." I stood up. Then that's all I needed to hear. I turned to leave. "Miss S. Mitchell." I looked back. "How is he?" Lila asked softly. "Daniel, how is he?" I smiled. "He's happy. He has a wife who loves him, a son, a life. Everything you tried to take from him, he has back, and you have no part in it." I walked out of that prison, got in my car, and drove home. And I never looked back. Epilogue. 5 years later today is Sunday. I'm 73 years old now. My kitchen is full. Daniel and Grace and Tommy, who's 5 now and obsessed with dinosaurs. Grace is pregnant again, a girl this time. They're going to name her Rose, after me. We're having pot roast, mashed potatoes, and green beans. The same meal I used to make when Tom was alive. Tommy sits in Daniel's old chair, telling me a very long story about a TREX he saw at the Oregon Museum of Science and Industry. Daniel and Grace hold hands across the table, the way Tom and I used to. And I look around at my family, this beautiful, resilient, whole family, and I think about how close we came to losing this. How close I came to losing Daniel. Lila got out of prison 6 months ago. She completed her sentence, served her time. I heard through Grace, who still keeps tabs on old cases, that Lila moved to Idaho, started over somewhere new. I don't know if she's changed. I don't know if she's hurting people again. I hope not. But honestly, it's not my concern anymore, because here's what I learned through all of this. Forgiveness isn't about the person who hurt you. It's about refusing to let them have any more of your life. I don't forgive Lila because she deserves it. I forgive her because I deserve peace. And I have it now. Tommy tugs on my sleeve. Grandma, can we have ice cream? I smile. After dinner, sweet boy. Daniel catches my eye across the table and smiles. That same smile from when he was 5 years old, before life got complicated. Grace squeezes his hand, and I feel Tom here with us. In the warmth of this kitchen, in the laughter of our grandson, in the love that refused to break. Quiet doesn't mean weak, and a mother's love never forgets, but it also never stops hoping. And sometimes, if you hold on long enough through the darkness, you make it back to the light. Thank you for walking this long journey with me. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Life can break us, but it doesn't have to defeat us. I'll be back soon with another story, another truth, another reminder that we're all stronger than we think. Until then, take care of each other. And remember, there's always hope, even in the darkest moments. God bless.